everyone, it's Olivia. Today we are doing the mid-year reading check-in. I do this every year. Whether or not I round out the year with everything I read remains to be seen, but we're doing it for 2026. I have read 23 books so far this year, and that is the most I think I've ever read to the midpoint of the year ever. Let's go through all 23, shall we? And fun fact, I filmed this once before. Did I talk about the books? No. You wouldn't know what a single book was about if I had posted the other one. The first book I read this year was Why We Love and Hate Twilight by Sarah Elizabeth Gallagher. You may be familiar with her name if you are on TikTok at all. She is the woman that is kind of like the head of the Twilight fandom right now. She has fun headcanon. She makes fun of the books. She praises the books. She's just very well-rounded in her approach to the most insane book series of all time. So this book in particular is about all of that. She does mostly character analysis. And I wish she spoke more about fandom, but I think that that's my job as someone who studies fandom and who wrote their master's thesis on fandom. So I would like to go more into like why older women loved Twilight so much. I think that that's something that has been under theorized because a lot of people have spoken about like the Mormonism and the like inherent racism and all of that, but I think that Twilight spoke to an older generation of moms beyond my daughter is into this. So I think that would be super interesting. Maybe one day if I get bold enough to give a full like video essay. That day is not today, but I've got some ideas about some video essays I could write, so I have to start writing them down. Next book I read, Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. If you're unfamiliar with this is the gothic novel of Kathy and Heathcliff and their relationship, not romantic though, although people keep adapting it into a romance and I'm like, did you read the book? No, you read the first half. I would say that yes, the first half has been adapted many a times and it is always portrayed as a romance, a toxic romance, but still a romance, and so people are like, Kathy and Heathcliff. And I think people forget that one, this is a ghost story. Two, this is a story that has a second part, and the second part is where kind of thematically it explores breaking the trauma, abuse, both domestic, racial, child, animal that lives in this book. And the only one that comes close, and this is one of my favorite directors, Andrea Arnold, she's also the only person to cast a black man as Heathcliff, which is very important. The film, obviously, that just came out with Margot Robbie, and like, I love Margot Robbie, but that was not a good choice for her. And the reason being is that if you open your books to page 54 and 55 in the Barnes & Noble edition, Nellie, who's one of our narrators, is interacting with Heathcliff and making him look more presentable because he wants to win over Kathy. Heathcliff says, I wish I had, let me move my sticky note out of the way. I wish I had light hair and a fair skin and was dressed and behaved as well and had a chance of being as rich as he will be. More dialogue ensues, ... Then, once Nellie is finished getting him all ready, she says, tell me you don't think yourself rather handsome. I'll tell you I do. You're fit for a prince in disguise, who knows, but your father was emperor of China and your mother an Indian queen, each of them able to buy up with 1 week's income Wuthering Heights. I'm not very good at popcorn reading, but then there's more to that as well. I think before that quote, like literally 2 lines up, it says, a good heart will help you to a bonny face, my lad. I continued, if you were a regular black, and a bad one will turn the bonniest into something worse than ugly. So tell me why Jacob Elordi was cast. You can't. In no realm can that be justified if you've read this book. Anyway, and at the end, Kathy does die, but she doesn't have a miscarriage. It's her daughter that breaks the cycles. Anyway, that movie sucked. Book is fantastic. I highly recommend it. It's not an easy read by any stretch of the imagination, so I read it with the audiobook, and I was able to understand because, like, the Yorkshire accent is written out, and sometimes you're like, huh? Very, very good story. Highly recommend. Next, I read Nightwing Volume 5. What happens in this story? Couldn't tell you. All I know is I had fun. I love Nightwing. I think he's a goofy, fun superhero. I also, if you're not familiar, Nightwing is Dick Grayson, who was the original Robin. So the Robin in Teen Titans, the one I had a crush on when I was a teenager, or not even a teenager, like 8 years old, that's that character. And it carries through. He's insane and funny and witty and intense and all of the things. I love that in every comic there's at least one pun immediately followed by "Shut up, Nightwing." Also, double cheeked up at all times. I can't put that in there. Next, I read Mad Honey by Jodi Picoult and Jennifer Finney Boylan. This is the story of the murder of a trans girl and the fact that her boyfriend, who is framed for her murder, is on trial. And it's kind of like baby's first empathy for trans people. Like, it's very beginner friendly. However, the story's not that good. The characters are not that interesting or well written. The people who wrote it takes place in New England. So as you guys know, I'm from New England. I'm very, very protective of that image. And they're like, oh, it was a lovely early April day. I'm like, no, it wasn't. There's snow on the ground. It's probably cold, wet, and raw. There's no way. There was another moment. So the main character is from Seattle, where apparently they call a water fountain something other than a water fountain. But in New Hampshire, we called it a bubbler. And so in the book, she goes, or a water fountain as they call it. I'm like, no. So no, I did not like this book, but I could see handing it to someone who maybe has never had empathy for a trans person in their life. I don't know. Wasn't for me. So the next book I read was The Lost Bookshop by Evie Woods. This is the story of, well, it kind of overlaps. So there's a story of Opaline, which is in like the 1920s. And then there is Martha and Henry, and their story is relatively contemporary, I believe, like 2019, 2021, something like that. And Opaline owns a bookshop that just disappeared one day. They have no clue where it went. And so Martha and Henry are looking for this bookshop that is supposed to be where Martha lives, but it just disappeared off the face of the earth. It's magical realism. The basis of it thematically is discussing women's rights. And it takes place in Dublin, so it's like beautiful. But Martha deals with a physically abusive husband. Opaline was put into a forced marriage. She runs away from it, and so it's her on the run, and the bookshop is her safe place. Sounds great. I just found myself being like, on it. Like, I wasn't wowed. I wasn't completely offended by it. I don't know. It wasn't enough magical elements, and it wasn't enough realism to have it mean anything. The stakes felt, I don't want to say the stakes felt low, because stakes are always high when dealing with domestic abuse. I don't want to trivialize that in any way, shape, or form. But the book itself just wasn't well written enough. I thought the ending was a little weird. So, I digress. It wasn't my favorite. By the way, most of these are digital books because I got a Kindle for Christmas and I have been loving it. And I do use the Libby app with my Kindle, and it's great. Anyway, moving on. The next thing I read was The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Parkins Gilman. This is a classic short story. A lot of people really like it. I really enjoyed it. I think it's fantastic. Everyone should read it. What is it about? It is about a woman who is very clearly suffering from postpartum depression, and her only outlet after being locked in a house by her doctor/husband is to write, and she does it in secret, and it's kind of her going mad because she's been isolated from her husband, her friends, her family, her baby, and it's told through this horrible yellow wallpaper that she despises that is on the wall, but she can't escape, obviously. And by the end of it, you will go, whoa. It's good. It's like, how many pages was this? 35 pages and worth every second. Fantastic read. I wish, for once in my life, that there wasn't cat hair on every surface of everything. No matter what I do, it's always there, and my nose is itchy, and I've freaking had it. So if my nose is getting redder and redder, that's why. I read another short story, The River Has Roots. It's about sisters and the bond between sisters and how only sisters can save each other. And as an older sister, I thought it was nice. It's fantasy, it's a fae tale. It kind of tells, how do I shorten this description that I'm reading right now? I'm just going to read it to you. In the small town of Thistleford, on the edge of Fairy. I hate Fairylands. I hate when they just shorten it to Fairy. I liked this, but like, on the edge of Fairylands dwells the mysterious Hawthorne family. There, they tend and harvest the enchanted willows and honor an ancient compact to sing to them in thanks for their magic. Why are there typos on this description? Yikes, that doesn't bode well, because I did enjoy this. None more devoted than the family's latest daughters, Esther and Isabel, comma, who cherish each other as much as they cherish the ancient trees. But when Esther rejects a forceful suitor in favor of a lover from the land of fairies, not only the sisters bond, but also their lives will be at risk. It was good. It was good. I really enjoyed it, actually. It was, how many pages was this? It was short. 130 pages. So, quick read. The way that I'm struggling to read right now is deeply disappointing. Although I did read something, shocker, that said if you're good at reading in your head, you probably struggle to read out loud because they're two different like mechanics in your brain. And I was like, oh, that's why I suck at popcorn reading, but I can read 20 books in 6 months. I wanted to read something dumb, and boy was it dumb. This is Until the World Falls Down by Jordan Lind. I had rewatched Labyrinth, I think, or something involving Labyrinth had like struck my fancy, and I was like, I bet there's really good fan fiction about this story that's aged up where Sarah falls in love with the Goblin King. And that's what I wanted to read. And all of the recommendations said this book. There were good references, like they weren't on the nose, but if you had seen the film, you would be like, oh, that's a Labyrinth reference. However, comma, the whole point of Labyrinth the film is a coming of age story, and Sarah realizes the power that she has within herself as she goes from child to adolescence, and it's about growing up, right? It's a great weird girl movie, and the puppetry is amazing, and the sets are incredible, and David Bowie is incredible, right? I love all of those things. So this book took all of that and completely missed the point of Labyrinth, because it is a romance, right? And she's supposed to fall in love with the Goblin King. In this story, spoiler alert, the Goblin King is in love with someone else. And so the point of the book should have been that the main character, whose name is not Sarah, I cannot remember the name, but the love interest name is Enver, which was fucking dumb. What is this girl's name? Nell. That was the name of the main girl. Okay, so Nell should have been able to say, that's fine, I'm good on my own, I'm happy on my own. Tell me why, for 11 pages at the end, she throws a fit. It's not fair, we fell in love, we had a connection, blah, 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 like ripping her life, not in the Labyrinth apart. And I said, are you fucking kidding me? Because I appreciate a nuanced ending. I don't care. You can have like the best chemistry and like good smutty scenes in a romance book, but if you don't stick that landing, I'm gonna hate it. And guess what? I fucking hated it. It was terrible. There was no point to anything that she went through in that book if she's just gonna throw a fit and, oh, they threw a fit. I heard you in my Labyrinth and we can be together. Shut up. I was so angry. So that gives a big old thumbs down. They almost had me. The smut was almost good enough to make that worth the recommendation. No, it wasn't. So after I read that, I said, let me read something so insanely intelligent. I was so pissed off. I had to use my brain. I was like, I can't. So this next one is Ring Shout by P. Jelly Clark. I think that's how you say the middle name. So the tagline of this book is, in America, demons wear white hoods. You know where we're going with this. Also, I think the cover tells you that we're talking about the Deep South and the KKK. In 1915, The Birth of a Nation, if you've never seen that film, good. All you need to know is that it's one of the earliest Hollywood films. It is also one of the most racist films I've ever seen in my entire life, and we still talk about it because of the cinematography. In film history, we still talk about Birth of a Nation because of the cinematography. The content of the film, horrible. The Birth of a Nation cast a spell across America, swelling the Klan's ranks and drinking deep from the darkest thoughts of white folk. All across the nation, they ride, spreading fear and violence among the vulnerable. They plan to bring hell to earth, but even Ku Kluxes can die. Standing in their way is Maurice Boudreaux and her fellow resistance fighters, a foul-mouthed sharpshooter and a Harlem hellfighter. Armed with blade, bullet, and bomb, they hunt their hunters and send the Klan's demons straight to hell. But something awful's brewing in Macon, Georgia, which is relatively not really close to me. And the war on hell is about to heat up. Can Maurice stop the Klan before it ends the world? So, what they are talking about, it's like fantasy horror a little bit, but they're talking about like using propaganda to corrupt the minds of and like really feed into the hate that already exists within white people. This takes place in the 1920s, by the way. So post World War I. That's why they're all like very well versed in combat. They all fought in the war. I didn't love the story. It was a little convoluted but it was also like kind of surrealist. It had a lot of good ideas, but none of it was coherent. But that being said, I get what they were trying to do. And so I can appreciate that. And using, this demonic horror to talk about how do I even begin to phrase this properly? The racism within the southern United States. That all I get. I get using Birth of a Nation, because it was this mass propaganda event, to use that as a catalyst. Just some of it was like, okay, you lost me completely in terms of plot within the canon of the story, but thematically I can appreciate it. And I will continue to read books that, one, talk about film history, because I love talking about film history, and two, discuss the racism that is prevalent in the United States, because it's important to read about. Next, Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I am slowly working my way through the classics. I don't know if I'm going to read all of them this year. I'll read some. This one is a gothic novel. If you haven't heard of it, that's crazy. But if you haven't, because for whatever reason, this is the story of Dorian Gray. He gets a portrait painted by Basil, who is an excellent character. Unintentionally, the painting is magic, and every corrupted thing that Dorian Gray does not show on his face. It ends up on the painting. So his soul is reflected in the painting, and just the longer he goes down this road of hedonism, the more his painting and soul is corrupted, right? This book is so good. It's a little slow in the middle, but it's really good. More than anything, I think the most interesting thing about this book in particular is that Oscar Wilde was arrested on the grounds of homosexuality. Right, wrong, indifferent, wrong, by the way. It's very, very prevalent in this book, because there is a scene, and I didn't mark anything in here. There's a scene where Lord Henry, who's another character, is talking to himself about how beautiful he thinks Dorian Gray is. And I believe, I'm paraphrasing, but the quote is something along the lines of, "He's so beautiful, I want to dominate him." And I sat there and said, now hold on just a second. What? So that's why you should read this. Yes, it is in that gay. And what's so interesting about the character of Lord Henry as well is that he's so undeniably gay for Dorian that he's like misogynistic, and that's something that people don't talk about enough, is that gay men can be the biggest perpetrators of misogyny and sexism. And it's interesting to explore that, and I would like to explore that more a little bit in this novel. I don't have my fully fledged argument in it, but I also would go so far, because I was doing more research, and Oscar Wilde had said that Lord Henry is who people think I am, and Basil is who I want to be. And then I think he probably sees a lot of himself with Dorian Gray, so somewhere in the middle. Yeah, the whole thing was just so interesting. I'm not doing a great job of explaining it, because it's not really like a whole lot of plot. I mean, there is, but it's at the end, and I can't spoil anything that happens, but there's some drama in here. But I think it's interesting to explore homosexuality within this novel, the misogyny within this book, and even more the path of hedonism and Oscar Wilde's arrest. But also, upon Oscar Wilde's arrest, Oscar Wilde was friends with, where are you? There's a book down here. Bram Stoker. And so it's rumored, and there is a lot of documentation to prove this. I don't have any of it with me right now to prove to you. But upon Oscar Wilde's arrest, Bram Stoker was very worried and very close pals with him, with good old Oscar Wilde. And so it's the whole, there's no such thing as a straight vampire, and they kind of feed off each other. And like the fear of the other that exists in this book was inspired by this book. The classics are cool, man. I don't know. It took me a while to get into them, but I'm really glad that I'm slowly making my way through it. I also haven't read Dracula yet, which is why it's down here, because it's TBR. I can't decide if I want to do Dracula or Frankenstein first, but I think I'm going to do Frankenstein because I just watched The Bride, directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal, and it was a mess, but it's worth talking about. And then I also want to talk about Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein because I don't understand why there was a Lord Byron quote at the end of it. And I think that if I understood the source material, I could have a more valid argument as to why both of those adaptations are a mess. Anyway, we gotta move on. I can't talk about the classics anymore, but I do love them. Next, I picked up, well, I didn't pick up, roughly 3 years ago, 2.5, I had signed up for a Kickstarter with Wraithmark to do an illustrated version of V.E. Schwab's Shades of Magic series. So I just did the first one. I, at the moment, cannot afford 2 and 3, which deeply saddens me. But anyway, I finally got it because after a bunch of like technical snafus that they were very open about, so it was worth doing. And I just wanted to reread this book series that I like, and I wanted to see some illustrations because I miss illustration in books, especially fantasy novels. Like I always see it in my head, and I love to see other artists rendering, so I'm looking for an illustration to show you guys, not just like chapter markers. No, I just had a really good one. Where'd it go? No. Okay, we'll look for another one. Here is, I don't want to break the spine for once. This is Lila Bard. I mean, like, the illustrator did such a good job. I wish that they put the illustrator's name on here. That's, like, the one thing I can complain about, is that I don't know the name of the artist who did all of the beautiful artwork that's in here. But, like, it's a gorgeous book. It's got foiled red edges, like the inside cover is gorgeous. So I have a lot of Shades of Magic stuff in my room. I've got 2 posters and like maps, or they're 2 maps of the 4 Londons stacked on top of each other. So I just wanted more artwork because I think it's really great. And then also not related to the Shades of Magic series, but also it's all the way across the room. V.E. Schwab's book Gallant has gorgeous illustration, so if you haven't picked either of those up yet, you definitely should. So after I finished rereading A Darker Shade of Magic, I picked up the 2nd and 3rd and 4th books in the series. These 2, which are, book number 2 is A Gathering of Shadows, which is actually my favorite in the series, and then A Conjuring of Light, which is the conclusion of the first arc in the Shades of Magic series. I read those, and then I picked up Fragile Threads of Power, 2 and 3 in the 2nd arc for the Threads of Power series, which are in the world of Shades of Magic, have not been written yet, but I was happy to reread this one and get reacquainted as she writes the 2nd book, which comes out in maybe 2 years, so it will have been like 4 years at that point since we got a new Shades of Magic book, which I'm impatiently waiting for. Okay, next I read some comic books because the Avatar Aang movie leaked. May or may not have seen clips on TikTok for days on end. So the first, and I went over all of this in my May reading wrap up, but we're going to go over it again. I read 6 of the comics, but it was, again, 2 story arcs, so 3 and 3. So the first arc is The Promise, and it's about the politics of forming the new world post 100-Year War. Like, how do you unify it again? And so it has to do with the colonies that the Fire Nation had, and how do you reconcile when there are entire generations that grew up in this colony, but they were the colonizers, and so they belong to the Fire Nation, but they don't feel like they're part of the Fire Nation. And then you have the Earth Kingdom, who's like, we would like our home back, please, that has been taken over by that. But it's like a whole, what is the name? Dealing with the diaspora of colonization. That is what I would like to say. And it's also, Zuko is stepping into, this role as, Fire Lord, right? And he has a lot of work to do to repair the hurt that his crazy ass daddy and his crazy ass grandpa and his crazy ass great grandpa did to the world. And he says to Aang, this is why it's called The Promise, he says to Aang, if you see me acting like my father, kill me. And so it's about Aang realizing what his role is in the world and like them understanding their roles and how they're going to repair the world. Great. Went into the politics way, way more than the show ever could, which is great. And then the second one is to tie up a loose end that was left on the show. Because if you know, the last episode, which was supposed to lead into season 4, which we didn't get, Zuko goes to Ozai, crazy ass daddy, and says, where is my mother? And so it's the story about what happened to his mother post her disappearance. And I think that it could have been better. I mean, I like tying up a loose end. It could have been better if we went a little more in depth on like how horrific I think Ursa's relationship was with Ozai, but I also don't know how far into that the show or the writers would be capable of doing. Either way, both were great. Next, I read a horror book. I've been into horror recently. So I read The Eyes Are the Best Part. This is about a young Korean American girl. Her father leaves her mother and her sister and herself, and her mom starts dating this white man who is deeply fetishizing Asian women, multiple Asian women, and not only her mother, but her and her sister, and then he's also cheating on her mother with another Asian woman. Yeah, it's great. It's a good for her horror. I was talking to a friend, and I said that I wish it was a little more intense at the end, but other than that, it was pretty good. Again, good thing to explore is the fetishization of young Asian women. Not just young Asian women, period. I did enjoy it. I think it's worth reading. Next, I read Heated Rivalry by Rachel Reed. The show is fantastic. Jacob Tierney is a great filmmaker. The book is bad. It's just written so like, and then they did this, and then this happened, and then they did this together. And then Shane thought, well, I'm a big NHL player. I couldn't possibly be in a gay relationship. And I understand that thought process being repeated again and again when exploring toxic masculinity, homophobia, all of that. However, you have to write different sentences. You cannot write the same thing over and over again. This camera's gonna die, hurry it up. The last book I read was Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. I adored this book. It's the best book I ever read. I love that it was exploring things like genetic mutation, bioengineering, genetics, and in some ways I would even go far as to say eugenics, because they're trying to have like genetic perfection and like copying everything. I think you could make the hop, skip, and a jump to like venture capitalism and AI and how they were finding funding for that and how it's actually a net zero because it's destroying the environment, just like messing with the environment with dinosaurs could do. I like that it has to do with ethics in science, and it's just all so good. And it's also like an environmental exploration, because at one point Dr. Ian Malcolm, who's played by Jeff Goldblum in the film, is talking about how like after there is this anthropological dig, right? Do you clean up after yourself? No. Oh, it's the rape of the natural world. You stick your stethoscope, your like thing into the world, and you leave it. And you leave it a mess, and you don't clean up after yourself, and you've just disturbed everything in the name of discovery. And you don't do discovery for the sake of understanding. It's discovery for the glory. So 110% would recommend that book. And that is, oh wait, no, I have one more thing to talk about. Current read. This is The Woman Destroyed by Simone de Beauvoir. It's 3 short stories that are exploring the death of passion within older women. If you don't know who Simone de Beauvoir is, she's the author of The Second Sex, renowned feminist philosopher, feminist scholar. Wow, I couldn't remember that word. Yikes. And so I wanted to read some of her work. I appreciate that this is fiction before I dive into The Second Sex, because I like to read intelligent books now. I am no longer a romance fan. So with that, I will let you know how this goes once I finish it. So thank you all so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. You know the drill. I will see you guys next time. Bye.